The dollar is dying, and Trump is holding the match. It's not speculation anymore, it's crisis. The U.S. dollar is falling faster than it has in over half a century. Over 10% wiped off its value in just 6 months. And the culprit isn't a global recession or foreign interference. It's Donald J. Trump. The self-proclaimed master negotiator has become the architect of America's economic unraveling. While the world watches the dollar bleed, Trump blames everyone but himself, Jerome Powell, China, even Canada. But the truth is, the chaos stems from within. Trump's obsession with tariffs, economic intimidation, and public spats with the Federal Reserve didn't just erode investor confidence. It obliterated it. Foreign governments are dumping U.S. debt. Private investors are looking to gold and crypto. And meanwhile, Canada's Mark Carney is quietly laying down the blueprint for a post-dollar global economy. Carney's silent revolution. While Trump fans the flames of fiscal instability, Carney builds. He doesn't posture. He doesn't threaten. He reforms. Canada, under Carney's guidance, has been focused on internal economic sovereignty, eliminating interprovincial trade barriers, investing in domestic supply chains, and stabilizing its currency through disciplined fiscal policy. The result? A Canadian dollar that's gaining strength as the U.S. dollar nosedives. Carney sees what Trump never could. The future belongs to economies that cooperate, adapt, and earn trust, not those that scream, sanction, and stumble through one crisis after another. Trump's economic civil war. By treating allies like enemies, Trump didn't just isolate America diplomatically. He strangled it economically. His tariffs on Canadian auto parts, steel, and aluminum backfired spectacularly. U.S. manufacturers were hit with higher costs. Assembly lines slowed. Union jobs vanished. And for what? A few applause lines at a rally? Trump turned the North American economic engine into a battlefield. He imposed 5% tariffs on Canadian vehicles, ignoring decades of integrated production across Detroit and Ontario. The result? Chaos. Automakers were forced to ship production to Mexico or overseas. Car prices soared. Workers paid the price. All while Trump bragged about bringing jobs back. The Fed fight and Wall Street panic. No president in modern history has so openly attacked the independence of the Federal Reserve. Trump repeatedly humiliated Chair Jerome Powell, demanding rate cuts that defied economic logic. Investors weren't amused. The market needs stability, not a tantrum-driven monetary policy. Confidence plummeted. Foreign capital began fleeing. Credit agencies issued warnings. Trump's interference triggered tremors across the financial world. Every time he tweeted about the Fed, the markets dipped. Every insult hurled at Powell chipped away at America's credibility. Meanwhile, Carney championed central bank independence, reinforcing investor confidence and insulating Canada from similar turbulence. Canada's strength through unity. Under Carney, Canada pursued a different path: unity. He tackled one of Canada's oldest economic inefficiencies: interprovincial trade barriers. By harmonizing regulations between provinces, Canada unleashed internal economic growth without relying on volatile external partners. This wasn't flashy. It didn't make headlines. But it worked. It created jobs. It lowered consumer prices. It sent a signal to the world. Canada is stable, strategic, and self-aware. Carney built trust while Trump destroyed it. Debt bomb. America's time is ticking. Under Trump, the U.S. national debt soared past $37 trillion. Annual interest payments exploded to nearly $1 trillion. That's not policy. That's malpractice. And the credit markets know it. Moody's slashed the U.S. outlook. Bond yield spiked. Inflation became the new norm. Carney, by contrast, kept Canada's deficits in check. He didn't rely on debt-fueled tax cuts for billionaires. He invested strategically, ensuring that government spending delivered real economic returns. Canada stayed resilient while Trump mortgaged America's future. A post-dollar world? Carney's quiet coup. Carney has long been a vocal advocate for diversifying the global financial system. He's proposed digital currency reserves, global carbon pricing, and alternatives to U.S.-centric trade. While Trump clings to a weakening dollar and rails against a global order, Carney is helping design the next one. More countries are looking to de-dollarize. Energy contracts are being signed in euros and yuan. Central banks are stocking up on gold. The dollar is losing its grip, not because of foreign enemies, but because of domestic incompetence. And in this vacuum, leaders like CARNEY are quietly stepping in. Trump's America is becoming a warning. CARNEY's Canada is becoming a model. One is driven by chaos, corruption, and confrontation. The other by strategy, solidarity, and sovereignty. As the dollar falls and the debt rises, the question is no longer who will lead, it's who can be trusted. And on that front, CARNEY speaks softly but carries the world's confidence. Trump just yells. And nobody's listening anymore. Currency carnage. Trump's fiscal fantasy meets global reality. Let's be clear, this isn't a natural economic cycle. This isn't an unfortunate downturn. This is engineered collapse. And the architect is a man who bragged about banqueting casinos, Donald Trump. Under his watch, the U.S. dollar isn't just dipping, it's free falling. Not because of market forces, but because of market fear. Fear of his next tweet. Fear of his next insult. Fear of his next irrational policy announcement. Trump treated the global financial system like a hostile negotiation room. He threatened allies. He destabilized central banks. He inflated debt to unsustainable levels. He governed like a gambler, not a guardian. And now, the chips are gone, the house is on fire, and he's still bluffing like he's in control. CARNEY's currency game, discipline, not delusion. Mark CARNEY understood something Trump never did. Currencies reflect confidence, and confidence is built on trust, transparency, and discipline, not slogans, not stunts. While Trump battered the Fed, CARNEY backed the Bank of Canada. While Trump flooded the market with debt-fueled stimulus and boasted about stock tickers, CARNEY worked quietly to strengthen long-term fundamentals, labor participation, energy independence, and regulatory clarity. The result? As investors flee the dollar, many are turning to currencies like Canada's, small, stable, and increasingly sovereign. Digital currency leadership, where the future is forged. While Trump mocked Bitcoin and declared war on digital innovation, CARNEY was working with international partners to imagine a new monetary order, one not dependent on any single nation's erratic leadership. He proposed a global digital reserve, backed by a basket of currencies, to reduce global vulnerability to U.S. political chaos. It wasn't just an idea. It was a warning shot, a future-proofing strategy. Because in the post-Trump world, nobody wants to be held hostage by America's internal dysfunction, the trade war's toxic legacy. Let's talk about legacy. Trump's trade war didn't win any wars. It didn't bring jobs home. It didn't punish China or discipline Europe. What it did was wreck the credibility of U.S. trade diplomacy. Under his watch, NAFTA was scrapped and replaced with a deal that added layers of bureaucracy and uncertainty. Steel and aluminum tariffs alienated allies. Retaliatory tariff from Canada, Europe, and even Japan drove up prices on U.S. goods, decimating small businesses. Farmers lost export markets they relied on for decades. Meanwhile, Canada inked free trade deals with the EU and Pacific nations, deals the U.S. abandoned under Trump's America Alone doctrine. Health crisis meets economic disaster. Trump didn't just destabilize markets. He destabilized lives. His cuts to Medicaid didn't just affect hospital budgets. They drove entire rural communities into crisis. Clinics closed. Health workers were laid off. Preventable deaths increased. CARNEY, meanwhile, championed healthcare as economic infrastructure. He recognized that a healthy workforce is a productive one. That access to medicine isn't just humane, it's smart economics. While Trump mocked universal healthcare as socialism, CARNEY expanded funding for mental health, elder care, and pandemic resilience. The difference? One leader cared about optics. The other cared about outcomes. The investment exodus. Foreign direct investment in the U.S. fell sharply under Trump. Why? Because unpredictability is poison to capital. CEOs don't invest billions where policy changes come by tweet. They don't expand factories where trade deals are canceled on a whim. Trump's behavior created what analysts call geopolitical risk premium. Translation: the U.S. became more expensive to do business in, not because of taxes, but because of chaos. Canada, under CARNEY's influence, became a refuge for rationality. It positioned itself as a stable jurisdiction with predictable regulations and a clear climate plan, attracted international investors fleeing Trump's economic minefield. The energy divide. Trump clung to fossil fuels like a lifeline. He rolled back regulations, gave subsidies to coal, and fought wind and solar like they were foreign invaders. His version of energy dominance was rooted in a 1950s fantasy that ignored both market trends and environmental urgency. CARNEY led Canada in a different direction. He championed clean tech, carbon pricing, and electrification. He didn't just talk about climate change. He framed it as a financial risk. Under his guidance, banks were told to stress test portfolios for climate exposure. It wasn't ideology. It was risk management. It was leadership. Food security in a fragmented world. Trump's trade war devastated American agriculture. China stopped buying soybeans. Canada blocked U.S. dairy. India slapped tariffs on almonds and apples. Farm incomes collapsed. Suicide rates among U.S. farmers spiked. Trump's solution? Bailouts. Billions in emergency subsidies that papered over a permanent loss of market share. CARNEY responded differently. He met with Canadian farmers. He expanded subsidies but with a long-term plan, invest in soil health, seed science, and export diversification. Canadian grain exports rose. Dairy cooperatives thrived. Canada didn't just survive Trump's trade war. It gained ground. What comes after the fall? Trump's economic legacy is a house of cards built on slogans. CARNEY's is a blueprint. One man governed for headlines. The other governed for history. As the dollar continues its slide, the global order is shifting. Nations are asking serious questions. Can the U.S. be trusted with monetary leadership? Is it safe to peg reserves to a currency controlled by a volatile political system? CARNEY has positioned Canada as part of the answer to that uncertainty. He's laid the groundwork for a financial ecosystem that values cooperation over coercion, climate stability over oil dependency, and strategic patience over populist panic. Trump the wrecker, CARNEY the builder. The economic scoreboard doesn't lie. Trump leaves behind a weaker dollar, a fractured alliance system, skyrocketing debt, and a wounded reputation for American reliability. CARNEY, by contrast, strengthens Canada's place in a multipolar world, builds new bridges of trust, and shows what principled economic leadership looks like in an age of collapse. This isn't about partisan politics. It's about the future. It's about which kind of leadership we want guiding the world through inflation, climate chaos, and digital disruption. Trump's model is rage, reactivity, and ruin. CARNEY's is resolve, responsibility, and results. And as the global economy begins to rewire itself, one thing is becoming clear. The age of reckless American dominance is ending, and a new era of smart, sober, collaborative leadership is rising to take its place. CARNEY's vision, the global economy beyond Trump. What makes CARNEY's leadership resonate isn't just his contrast to Trump. It's his clarity about the future. While Trump obsesses over past trade grievances and clings to coal and steel like they're sacred relics, CARNEY is laying the groundwork for a 21st century economy, one that's digital, green, diversified, and resilient. He doesn't see globalization as a threat. He sees mismanagement and inequality as the real enemies, and he builds policy to fix them. CARNEY's advocacy for a global carbon tax, a diversified currency reserve, and financial inclusion shows he's not just managing Canada. He's contributing to a new framework for global economic cooperation. He speaks the language of modern markets and institutional reform. Trump, on the other hand, speaks the language of grievance and spectacle. The verdict: Trump bankrupted trust. CARNEY rebuilt it. At the heart of every economic crisis is a crisis of trust. Trump shattered that trust between the U.S. and its allies, between the markets and the White House, between the American people and their institutions. His war on expertise, facts, and diplomacy didn't just isolate America, it impoverished it. CARNEY rebuilt trust through methodical reforms, through strategic communication, and through policies grounded in logic, not ego. He didn't need to scream. He didn't need to bully. He just had to lead. And now, as the U.S. dollar wobbles and the debt climbs sky high, investors and nations are choosing where to place their faith. Trump offers volatility. CARNEY offers vision. And that vision, disciplined, collaborative, resilient, is a foundation for a new global order where trust, not tweets, drives prosperity. The collapse wasn't a coincidence. It was a consequence. Let's call it what it is. The dollar collapse under Trump didn't just happen. It wasn't a tragic mistake or an unforeseen turn of fate. It was the inevitable result of handing global economic influence to a man with a casino operator's mindset and the attention span of a goldfish. Trump didn't govern like a statesman. He governed like a bombastic brand manager, interested only in ratings, headlines, and applause. This man took the reins of the world's largest economy and treated it like a reality show season finale. Every press conference became an audition for conflict. Every summit, a chance to humiliate an ally. Every economic decision, a publicity stunt. So when you see the dollar sliding, don't be surprised. When you watch global capital flow to other currencies, don't be shocked. When Canada and the EU start building parallel trade infrastructures that intentionally bypass the U.S., don't say you weren't warned. CARNEY knew the game and changed the rules. While Trump tried to bully the globe into submission, Mark Carney played a different game altogether. He understood that power in the modern world doesn't come from yelling louder or thumping your chest at summits. It comes from trust, from consistency, from knowing that when you make a deal, it will be honored, not renegotiated via angry tweet at 3 a.m. Carney saw what was coming. He began quietly reshaping Canada's internal economic architecture, removing provincial trade barriers, expanding green investment, digitizing regulatory systems, so Canada wouldn't have to flinch every time the White House changed hands. He built Canada's resilience in layers: energy security, regulatory clarity, diversified trade relationships, and an unwavering commitment to institutional independence. And it worked. As Trump sowed chaos in the U.S., Canada became the adult in the room. As American fiscal policy grew unpredictable, Carney made Canada the sanctuary for international investors. While Trump made headlines, Carney made deals. A trade war America couldn't win. Trump claimed he loved trade wars because they were easy to win. But there's one glaring problem. They're not. Especially not when your biggest trading partners have leverage alternatives and more trust in their systems than you do in yours. The tariffs Trump slapped on Canada, steel, aluminum, autos, were meant to punish. Instead, they punished American businesses and consumers. Prices rose. Supply chains broke. Farmers got crushed. Detroit automakers warned of layoffs. Even conservative economists were forced to admit that Trump's version of economic nationalism looked a lot more like self-sabotage. Canada, under Carney's leadership, didn't respond with panic or chest-thumping. It responded with surgical retaliation, targeted tariffs on politically sensitive U.S. exports, and more importantly, it invested in reducing reliance on American markets altogether. Diversification became not just a goal, but a strategy of survival. Carney didn't need a megaphone. He had a calculator. The fiscal implosion, made in M.A. Jaland. The most dangerous part of Trump's economic legacy isn't the tariffs. It's the debt. A $37 trillion national debt with nearly $1 trillion in annual interest payments isn't sustainable. And Trump added more to that pile than any president in U.S. history. He blew through trillions in tax giveaways to the wealthy, claiming they'd pay for themselves. They didn't. He spent recklessly on PR-driven programs while gutting oversight. He treated the national treasury like a re-election campaign slush fund. And when the markets began to flinch, when inflation came roaring back, when the Fed had no choice but to raise interest rates, it was too late. The dollar's strength depends on confidence. And Trump's governance obliterated it. Trump's failures will be remembered in headlines. The tariffs, the debt, the collapse of the dollar. But Carney's victories may be harder to spot because they don't come with flashing lights. They come in the form of investor confidence, stable inflation, diversified trade, and public trust. And that's the real difference between Trump's America and Carney's Canada. One leader performed for the crowd while the stage collapsed around him. The other built quietly behind the curtain, ensuring that when the spotlight turned, there'd still be a show worth watching. Stay tuned. The dollar may be crashing, but Carney's new global order is just beginning.